Did you know that in 1919, a massive wave of molasses, over 2 million gallons, set through the streets of Boston at 35 miles per hour, causing unimaginable destruction and claiming 21 lives? Boston's North End was a bustling industrial hub in 1919, with factories, warehouses, and commercial buildings lining the streets. Amidst this industrial landscape stood a giant molasses tank, a storage facility for the Purity Distilling Company. The tank was an imposing structure, standing 50 feet tall and 90 feet wide, and held over 2.3 million gallons of molasses. It was an integral part of the city's economy, supplying molasses to rum distilleries and bakeries throughout the region. Built in 1915, the tank was a marvel of engineering, but its construction was also marked by concerns over its structural integrity. Workers had reported leaks and cracks in the tank's walls, which were dismissed by the company as minor issues. Despite these warnings, the tank was filled to capacity, putting immense pressure on its already compromised structure. As the winter of 1919 brought freezing temperatures to Boston, the tank's steel walls began to contract, further weakening its already fragile state. It was only a matter of time before disaster struck, and the people of Boston's North End were about to face a catastrophe unlike any they had ever known. In the years leading up to the disaster, the Purity Distilling Company had received numerous warnings about the tank's structural issues. Inspectors had identified leaks, cracks, and corrosion, but the company failed to take adequate action. Instead, they continued to fill the tank to capacity, ignoring the pleas of concerned workers and nearby residents. The company's negligence was not limited to the tank's construction. They had also failed to maintain the surrounding area, leaving a mess of debris and rubble that would soon become a deadly obstacle course. The residents of the North End had long complained about the eyesore, but their concerns fell on deaf ears. As the tank's condition worsened, the company's response was to simply paint over the rust and ignore the problem. It was a classic case of profit over people, where the pursuit of wealth took precedence over safety and human life. In the days leading up to the disaster, there were several close calls. On one occasion, a worker reported hearing a strange groaning sound coming from the tank, but his concerns were dismissed as mere paranoia. Another worker noticed a section of the tank's wall bulging outward, but again, the company failed to take action. The warnings were there, but they were ignored. The people of Boston's North End were living on borrowed time, unaware that their lives were about to be changed forever. On the fateful day of January 15, 1919, the temperatures were unseasonably warm, causing the molasses to expand and put additional pressure on the tank's walls. At around 12:40 p.m., the unthinkable happened. The tank burst, releasing a massive wave of molasses into the streets of Boston. The explosion was so loud that it was heard over a mile away. The streets immediately surrounding the tank were the first to be hit, with the molasses wave sweeping away everything in its path. People were crushed, buildings were destroyed, and the streets were filled with the acrid smell of molasses. Panic set in as people scrambled to escape the deadly wave. Those who were caught in its path were swept away, unable to escape the crushing force of the molasses. Horses and dogs were trapped, their cries echoing through the streets as they struggled to free themselves. The first responders were quickly overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Rescue efforts were hampered by the sticky, sweet mess that coated everything. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, and it would take days to comprehend the full extent of the destruction. The aftermath of the disaster was chaotic and heartbreaking. The city's morgues were overwhelmed with bodies, and the streets were filled with the sounds of grieving families. The once thriving North End was now a scene of utter devastation, with buildings reduced to rubble and the streets slick with molasses. As the city struggled to come to terms with the scale of the disaster, the finger-pointing began. The Purity Distilling Company was vilified for its negligence, and the city's officials were criticized for their inaction. It was a disaster that could have been prevented, and the people of Boston were left to pick up the pieces. In the years that followed, the city of Boston implemented sweeping changes to its safety regulations. The disaster led to a major overhaul of the building codes, and companies were forced to take greater responsibility for the safety of their workers and the surrounding communities. Today, the Boston molasses disaster is remembered as one of the most bizarre and tragic events in American history. It serves as a reminder of the importance of safety and accountability, and the devastating consequences of negligence and greed. So, what do you think about this bizarre and devastating event? Let us know in the comments below. And if you are interested in learning more about historical events, be sure to check out our other videos on our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical content.